So let's talk about who you are.
Who I am. So my name is Abby. I have, oh my gosh, I've been keeping reptiles I got back into it about 1.5 years ago. So I haven't been back into it for that long, but I have always been a animal lover, animal advocate, very interested in learning from animals, and have a pretty in-depth background of working with various species, from like large livestock to small animals, like kind of that whole range of animals.
If I look over here, understand that my youngest bearded dragon is like in a massive shed right now of his whole back. So he is running around just like prying himself on every single thing he can. And then to my right, I've got a zebra skinks and a emerald swift that are just not like jumping around the enclosures.
That's awesome.
So it's like, okay, so I kind of on like, yeah. So if you see me like doing this, understand like it's that. And then down here, I've got the gecko. Give me a second. I got it. The gecko. I think he's hard of sight. I don't think he's fully blind.
Oh, it's a little leopard. Oh no, that's not a leopard. What is that?
That is a Peter banded skink.
Peter banded skink. I've never even heard of that before. He's so cool.
Peter banded skinks, they only usually come out for like an hour or so. They're like a miniature blue tongue, but yet cohabitable.
Oh, that's cool.
And his name is the gecko. See, his eyes are open right now.
Yeah.
Usually they're not, but he hides his head, but yet he can't actually really see well. So he tries to jump off of stuff. He's going to take a leap of faith here in a minute. And he's going to, like, it's almost like a gecko.
Yeah.
He jumps off like a gecko. So that's why he got his name, the gecko.
The gecko, that's fun.
They bury themselves during the day. They come out like for like an hour or two right at dusk. So when my lights go off, they come out a little bit.
Yeah.
And so this is actually one of the breeds that oh God, what's his name? Philippe de Vosges says we need to have more of. See, he's like taking steps off. I've had Peter Bandage do that, but if you look, like he's so confused almost.
Yeah.
It's a little bit different than what you would see. Like, see right there, he just kind of yeah, because he just can't see well.
Oh.
They're a very hardy species when you take care of them, but they're only out a couple hours a day, and it's towards the night, and that's why he's the gecko, because of what he's doing right now. That's awesome. How he got his name.
He's cute. He seems really active. Like when you get him out.
Now, I'm a little surprised he's got his eyes open more now, and he responds to sounds.
Yeah.
So he actually responds to my voice. So this is very. God, I'm gonna put him back because he's just gonna keep doing this.
Little troublemaker.
But he stays out during the day, and that's very unusual because I guess he wants the heat, and since he's not very good at sight, like he's like, but yet. And that's interesting when you get into neuroscience. I just imagine that his brain, compared to what he's actually seeing, so his cerebral cortexes could be damaged. He had an infection. I believe he actually had stargazing.
Oh, interesting.
But that could be from trauma. But he did have bacteria buildup when I got him, and I fixed it so he doesn't stargaze as much. But now, and I know usually when we talk about stargazing, we talk about bearded dragons, and it's like they're immediately going to die.
Right.
And that's usually, yes, for a bearded dragon. This species, apparently not, because you could also get stargazing from damage to the brain. and you could get it from bacteria buildup. I did all sorts of stuff, so I don't know. I think he's hard of sight, not actually blind.
Yeah.
Which could mean that his eyes work. There's a thing called blindsight. I've said it in quite a few things. And blindsight is when a human being's cerebral cortex is damaged, but their eyes are not. Mm-hmm. So information is still dropping into the brain. So if you were to yawn and that person saw you yawn, even though they're blind, they will still yawn.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, because the information still drops. The reason why we don't see this in normal people, why it's hard to see this in a normal MRI, is because your cerebral cortexes are so powerful. And so it just takes over that spot.
Yeah.
So by not having that, they were able to see the information dropping. And they would guess colors and shape way more than they should be able to with randomness.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And so when we think about the eye on the top of the head for like a bearded dragon,
yeah,
as that goes through, there something I've mentioned before, like in some like posts and stuff, is that my understanding of how the mapping, because there shouldn't really be any difference in the neurons. So it's important to understand neurons. It's not necessarily really that important to go further than just a basic understanding of neurons. It's more important to understand the mapping of how their brain works.
Right.
It's talked about with anoles. Anything that's even close to their part of their brain that would change color, if that went off, their brains are so small that it would probably set off their color change.
Oh, interesting.
If you think about it that way.
Yeah.
We don't know. I don't know what's around that part of their brain. I have no idea. But whatever it is, like they could have a fart and go, their brain just activates and then they change colors. Like it's just like, okay, like, but it's so if we look at the bearded dragon brain, from my understanding, as of right now, their cerebral cortexes is actually on the bottom of their brain, where ours is on the back of our brain.
Right.
So that information has to travel from their top of their head all the way down to the cerebral cortex. And we hear, like, you know, Ryan McVeigh. Did you watch that interview?
I haven't seen it yet. No, I've got so busy with Finley and everything.
That's good. That's good, though. That's actually good. Sometimes I like it when people haven't actually seen. That way we don't get any answers that are deliberate.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. But so if we think about, like, he talks about, oh, well, you know, they see it and so they know what it is. Well, I don't think they know what it is right away.
Right.
I think they have to experience it. And I think that's why it's a physical experience at first. And it's like, well, it's a positive thing. So now they recognize that this leads to this. And that's why they go towards it. But that information of the stuff has to travel. Now, unless they're doing LSD or something, when you do that, that actually trips the brain.
Right.
And I wonder if we could use LSD with Parkinson's. Because Parkinson's also does the same.
Right.
So could we have some effect on that? I would love to kind of understand how that might work. But so their brains aren't doing that. Their brains are traveling. So that information has to travel. It's being dropped off in other spots. That's why it may not actually get to the cerebral cortex. They may not use their parietal eye as we think of, oh, well, this is automatically, they know what they're seeing.
Right. It goes back to the pathway of, like, what path is that information actually taking? Is it taking what we assume it's taking, or is it taking a completely different path that we don't even know to look for? Yeah. It's neurology is just so, there's so much we don't know. It's fascinating. We've
actually mapped a lot of parts of the brain. I just don't think there's enough people connecting those dots.
Right.
My brother is actually autistic, so I have some form of autism. We have no idea what the hell it is because it's not normal. I actually see faces and stuff. I actually have studies in human communication, nonverbal, like legitimate study. I'm fantastic poker player. I'm like, so I use this for animals. Like different, because most autistic people have trouble with that. So why am I on the exact opposite side of the spectrum? Because I'm not normal. Like nobody sees half of what I do in a minute. It would take them a week to see half of what I do in a minute. But then you have to realize, because I see it all the time, I have to learn to stop caring about it.
Right.
I actually did a video on the Kansas City Chiefs and why the psychology of it. And I believe Patrick Mahomes is similar to me in the way that his neurons. So when you talk about empathy, you have a spot here that's modeling. It's on the right side of the brain. You have your imagination and stuff back here that's a little more of a struggle for autistic. You have your cerebral cortex is in the back. You have your frontal lobe, which is the braking system and stuff. Usually I wait till after the interview, like after certain things. But this was just fascinating. I think all these are connected in Patrick Mahomes. And what happens when you're a child and you have that kind of stuff where you're alone or something, or you're using your imagination, those neurons get connected with myelin more. There's more. So the pathway speeds up. Right.
You get more, and that's where like that sensory overload starts happening, and you need to take a step back. Yeah.
And I wonder about the other side of the brain, because that's your memory. There's a spot right here about a quarter size of which is your blinking, your breathing, everything there. Well, all that goes back to your cerebral cortexes too. So if you're using your memory and seeing your memories, then why would it not have an effect on it? Could potentially. There's other pathways to take there, but if your pathway goes through that spot, wouldn't that create more anxiety or things like that when you think about memories?
I don't know. I guess it depends on how your brain processes it and then translates to human emotion, which is a whole other thing.
Yeah. What type of childhood would lead to that?
Right.
Like that connection. I don't know. And then that may be where we get clinically depressed. We get maybe some of these things. I don't know. I don't know at all. But this is a very interesting theory. And like with Patrick Mahomes, he talks about seeing the field. He's a super nice guy. So for him, he's practiced so much of his life by himself, practicing throwing the football properly. But so he can see it in his head. That's why he doesn't need to look to see where he's throwing.
He has it all memorized.
And so it's muscle memory, but it's more than that. Plus, if that goes through his empathy, he's actually possibly empathizing with the other players and saying, okay, if I'm that guy, I'm going to move this way because of this thinking.
Right.
And this is how, like, this scheme is lined up for this. So that's going to drive this guy to do this. And so he should be over here. So that should be empty field right here. When I see these three over here running because my eyes are over here, I know my route guys are doing this. So I know exactly where to throw the football and to do it all like that because his neurons from his frontal lobe, cerebral cortex, imagination, and empathy are all tied together.
Right.
That makes perfect sense to me, but it may be like insane. And something I like to say, like, I'm either brilliant or insane, and like I like multiple choice when it comes to that, and I like to jump across the line.
Yeah.
Every chance I get. This wasn't how I planned on starting this. It just kind of happened that way. I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. I'm all about organic conversation and letting it kind of go where it needs to go. So that's totally fine.
So what'd you think of that? Like how? What's your thoughts on
like all of that information? I am not a neuroscience scientist by any means. I've studied a little bit of it because I have a science background, but yeah, it's all just the functioning of neurons and those like pathways. Oh, I think you went away.
Go ahead. No, I did it on purpose.
Oh, okay. I was thinking,
most people do this in editing. I try to do it here, so it's quicker for editing.
Yes,
I do that myself.
Yeah, it's fascinating to me how we as individual humans process information that the world gives us, as well as like various animals and other creatures that don't, like, they see the world and process information differently than from what we do. Like the studies that have been done for how animals process light and color. Like there's so, like, what is it, mantis shrimp? Like the way they actually see the world is so different from us. I just find that amazing. And it's a good thing to learn as a human, to look at something that is not human, or even another human, and be like, oh, you're going to see and process things differently than I am. And I should be curious about it and want to ask questions about it and learn from it, instead of just assuming we're all the same.
I love that, because that's literally some of the things that, I don't know if you've ever watched any of my videos.
Not yet. I'm so sorry.
No, that's perfectly fine. That's perfectly fine. I never get mad at that. I never, like, that's not how this works. As a matter of fact, I don't think there's a lot of people that do. Like, I don't know if you know Herpiculture List, that podcast.
Yeah.
I try my best. I don't think they listen to my stuff either, but I still go out of my way to try to help them.
Nice.
I know Roy's voice was so low there for a little bit. I actually made a video explaining how he could fix that like that.
Nice.
And just like, boom, get it to him. Nobody watches mine compared to theirs, and yet I'm still like over here going, no, like I want to make sure you guys are getting this right.
Yeah, and I think that comes back around full circle eventually, right? So. Like people supporting people. Yeah, and it's social. The social media spectrum of things is always interesting too, because I feel like that ebbs and flows as well.
And that's the thing, is my videos are actually solid. I think they're actually good, because right now, like, are you not entertained? Like, that's kind of a good question. Are you entertained?
Yeah,
like,
no, I find.
So why would the audience not be?
Right. Yeah, I think again it goes back to kind of objectively being curious about what other people find interesting. Because I know everything that I love, like I love my snakes, I love my animals. I have family members who are like, it's not my thing. And that's fine. It's just like everything that I find fascinating, I know not everyone is going to find fascinating. So it's just a matter of kind of curating that audience that actually finds your stuff really interesting and wants to engage. Because I would like, Brian Barczyk said this the other day in one of his videos of, I would rather have, like, he asked the question, he's like, would you rather have 1 million followers, but not a whole lot of them engage with you? Or would you rather have, like 80,000 followers and the audience is super engaging? And I think the answer for me anyway is I would pick the 80K and have a really interactive, engaging time.
At this point, if I had 10 people who would engage more with me on my stuff, even if they're like, dude, that's a great idea, that's what keeps me here. Like, there was a lady in Quebec who saw one of my videos, the one I sent you with Bill Stewart, and he couldn't make it to like this. Well, I didn't ask him for the Saturday one. I should have asked him, but I asked him for Friday and he couldn't make it. But I sent, like, this lady caught that, and Keely, who's out of Three Sisters Rescue, talked about abuse and how some abuse people might be more toned to take care of animals. And it's like, okay, she picked up on that, wrote on the deal. I started talking to her. We still talk to this day. She watched all my videos, sent me a booklet. I can't tell you how much I Yes. Just yes.
One little thing like that can make just the world of difference.
It does.
And it's amazing.
I know once I move, hopefully that's the next step.
Mm-hmm.
But the fish tanks cause a background noise. That's why I have the earphones, because my voice does change a little bit with this over the actual deal. It sounds better when I don't use these, but yet my voice sounds better, but the background noise is that. Yeah. That's why I do that. And that's also why I want to show more of me, because she said like she wants to see more of what I'm saying. She wants to hear more from the actual people. Like, I am listening, people. When you say the things that piss me off is when like I write something like empathy and closure, and then somebody comes back and goes, your grammar's bad. Fuck you.
It's not the point.
It's like, no. So you took away from that, my grammar's bad. Now, if you would have said, okay, I like the topic, but I would be more inclined to actually talk to you if you got your grammar better, that's appropriate. Just automatic.
Constructive feedback is always, it's such I do. In one of the other things that I do, I work with people, and my job is literally to give them constructive criticism. And it's a fine-tuned art to be able to deliver that in a palatable way for some people, because some people want it, right? They're like, oh, hey, what can I do different to make this better? Like, give me suggestions, give me ideas. And other people, and again, I think it goes back to what you were saying about like, what was your childhood like? Where have you gained all of your experiences in those memories? And how is my approach to you being processed? And how are you responding to that? Because I think some people, no matter how you approach any kind of feedback, the defensive wall comes up. And I completely understand that, because I used to be that way too. And any kind of feedback, I was like, oh no, I'm doing it wrong, I'm a horrible person. And I would just shut it down. And it's just, it takes a lot of work. Because I also think there's this pervasive social umbrella of, if somebody's providing you feedback, you're doing it wrong, and being wrong is a very bad thing to do. I'm like, that doesn't really make sense though.
Yeah, no. I did a video on how to deal with people you may not like. I had DB Exotics and M95 Genetics on. And so it was literally, I reached out to him. He made that video. Well, I want people that even don't like me to reach out. And so I did a New Year's resolution, how to deal with people you may not like. And I gained a whole new respect for that guy. And I literally just told him, I wrote him. I said, dude, I'm not a fan of yours. I don't really appreciate some of the things you've done. And so let's have you on so I can get to know you. And he goes, immediately, he's like, well, I thought you were like, I thought it was funny at first. He goes, but he showed up, and I love that. Like, I actually appreciated him, even sometimes when he was I was over dominating the conversation, and he stopped me and actually encouraged M95 to say something.
Nice.
And I'm like, I just love that. Things like that, even though it may seem to me like, or to somebody else that, I was being rude or he was being rude to me. It's like, no, I just love that. That was just great. Like, that's a leadership quality.
Yeah. And I think that's that bridging of misunderstanding, like connecting misunderstanding to, okay, let's try and find some middle ground of at least understanding each other instead of just fighting. I think that's such an important step to take. And just thinking about our kind of little reptile community compared to the world at large, our community is still pretty small. There's not a whole lot of us that like to keep cold-blooded critters.
It's a lot bigger than what Google said it was.
It is. I'm just comparing it to the world population at large.
It's interesting because the gay and lesbian community only takes up like 2% of the population. Well, if we compare the numbers of that, I would think that we as reptile people, because just owning a reptile would be considered a reptile person, right?
Yeah.
So therefore, I would think that would be the same or bigger, but the exotic industry should be definitely bigger.
Yeah, it's a hard thing to tell because, you know, if we're cross comparing the size of the reptile community to the LGBTQ plus community.
Oh yeah, that's different.
Right. Yeah, and not everyone who is a part of the LGBTQ plus community is actually out, right? They're not. Yeah. There's people who.
Same thing for reptile people.
Yep, exactly. So it's hard to pinpoint those numbers for sure. But just like any community, you always have the drama and the infighting and all of that stuff. And I think like cancel culture has been a very popular but negative response system to fighting within communities. And I think it's starting to slowly shift to, hey, I'm going to call you out on this thing because it wasn't right? It was that's either something somebody said or an action someone did or what have you. Like, I'm going to call you out, but actually call you out to an action to correct it. Yeah. And admit like, oh my gosh, I said this thing. It was wrong.
My thing with that is, for me, if you're going to correct somebody and you're not willing to take the steps forward to help them correct it,
right,
keep your fucking mouth shut. That's just it. Like, it's like, if like I just got done saying, those guys don't watch me. I'm not gaining anything from this. I have a criticism about his volume, so I took the steps to help him with that volume.
Right. Yeah, I think it gets a little like hairy, I think, when it comes to action steps, because I think there's sometimes someone does something that's absolutely not okay, and everyone knows it's not okay, but not everyone knows the correct, or not even correct. Correct is the wrong word. The most efficient way forward. So I think the call out can still be important because there's power in numbers, right? And I think if you have at least a couple people willing to play mediator, essentially, and be like, hey, this is why this is hurting this group of people. This is some actionable items that I have taken personally that I have found have positive effects.
I made a video on this topic. Are we commenting on Facebook properly? And it was okay. So there was a instructor, a teacher, who got who was asking because she got a grant from Smarter Petco to get a bearded dragon for a classroom. They do that. So you have to use their stuff though.
Right.
So it's like, okay, so
live brand stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so everybody started piling on, and it was the exact same thing. I got mine from a PetSmart or Petco, and I'm fine. I got mine and I'm fine. I saw 60 comments written. 60. I went through 30 at least. I found one that was different. I'm like, that's too much. There is no way that lady is going to go through that many comments to find that one that's actually solid. You've literally just made this teacher's life harder.
Yeah.
But you were trying to help. It's like, okay, so if you see 3 people have said the same thing that you've said,
you don't need to say it.
Yeah, unless you've got something to add to it.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good kind of general good practice in commenting anywhere. Is the way that I personally respond to a comment or a post or something like that. I see the post. I read.
Oh,
wrote.
Sorry, I apologize. I was going to do something else.
So I read what they write, like in the caption. Read the caption, because if you have a question about what's in the video or in that post, quite often you'll already find the answer in the caption. And then if it's not in the caption already, I'll go through the comments and see if anybody's already asked that question or said what I was thinking. And if they had, and I don't have anything to add to it or respond to it, then like I'll either give that comment a like or just be like, that's fine. I can either say something else or like I know for some people, like the whole algorithm thing is huge, and the more comments, the better, the more likes, the better, all of that stuff. But I do know, like I've had a couple videos go viral and the comments are hard to parse through. And especially when it has something to do with snakes, you kind of have to monitor what's being commented, because if it's something really nasty or someone who's like, I had someone on one of my YouTube shorts threaten to come into my house and shoot one of my snakes. And I'm like, okay, this is why I monitor this, because now I can report you, because that's not okay.
Yeah, no.
Like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
And I think that's the other thing, is that mass commenting that you were talking about. It really feeds into the troll culture. And like people who post something like that, like, oh, I need to break into your house with a 45 and shoot you.
What did you find to eat?
Is that your beardy?
Yeah. What the hell did he eat? What are you eating, Hydra?
Is he eating a shed? Do beardies eat their shed?
Yeah, but I don't think it's shed. I think it's old leaf. It's an old green.
He likes to let it dry out a little.
Pitch does. Hydra will usually eat it wet. Pitch will actually pitch the bitch. Yes, I am talking about you. She scared the shit out of me yesterday. She was laying there and I came in and she was just...
Oh, no.
Like, oh, shit. Like, no. That's my baby girl.
She was just sleeping.
Family. And she's just like, what? Like, oh, you bitch.
That's funny. It's like they know. They're like, ha 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 ha.
Yeah, she would do that if she could. She's yeah. So I've really appreciated this so far. There's a couple things I wanted to say real quick. Going back to, we need to think about things different. I've said this on multiple podcasts, multiple episodes. So this isn't new for anybody that's been paying attention. But the little anoles, when I have them in the tanks, they see the glass. Where my beardies, they can't understand the glass. Like most of my lizards can't understand glass. The little anoles will actually walk up to the glass and then leap on it.
Oh my gosh, that's cute.
It is. But what that tells me is that they know the glass is there.
Right.
They understand it. Well, the thing about a gecko's palm is they often have little things on there, little fingers, that is the London force that actually grips on at a molecular level. So they're experiencing the world differently than we are. So that's why they see the glass, because they're not necessarily the brightest lizard, but yet they see glass. They just experience things so dramatically different. I think that's so cool to think about like that.
It's fun to observe too.
Say it again.
It's fun to observe too. Just watching how they interact. Like my super dwarf tick is, I don't know if you can see him. He's on his top shelf behind me, and he's super active usually. But like since I put his shelving unit in there, he's been just hanging out up on top, super happy and content. Where other times he'd be like at his glass, maybe wedging a little bit. So just, I don't know, just even not being able to fully understand the behavior of the observations that you're making, just the fact that you're making those observations in the first place. And then eventually maybe something else will happen and then something will click. Like with his face wedging, he kept on what he's incredibly social for a snake. He's a retic. He likes to come out. He'll just come out on his own, hang out for hours. And I still didn't want to see him wedging his face, because he gets like the little scales that kind of rub off on top of his head. He doesn't seem to cause him any pain, but it's still like, okay, there's something that you're not contented with in your living space. So I've done a couple kind of continued playing around with his setup. I added a fan system to his enclosure so he gets a little bit more circulation in there, and all of that, like little bits and pieces. It's like, okay, you're rubbing less, you're wedging less, like kind of observing that you're out in the open more. Like he's been laying out on that basking shelf almost every day since I installed them. So just little things like that. And that's like seeing the animals behavior shift like that just in little ways, and you can just see, okay, your behavior is showing that you're content and you're thriving and you're happy in your environment. And that makes me, there's just something about that for me personally that makes me, it's unmatched. It's just such a gratifying experience.
So before I get to the next question, I don't want to lose the audience because the goal today is that we're gonna finish introducing you. We're going to do the questions that I have for my study, and then which I've already messed up. I was going to have a different thing, but okay. That's okay. Then we're going to talk about the nonverbals of snakes, which we've already started. Because I don't own snakes. I don't have any. Okay. And then we're going to talk about U.S. ARC and leadership. And then we're going to talk about why it's important for the hobby to deal with political and social issues. And that's the goal for today with you, to talk to you about.
Perfect.
And I thought you were the perfect person to have on. But so audience, you can skip around because I'll have this time stamped, because there really is so much to take away from these videos that I really do need to start time stamping so people will actually go, okay, so I know now that he could do that. Like that's something like that. So now we know that I'm not just talking out my ass. I'm not, I've got something to contribute.
Right. Yeah. The time stamping is so useful because people can just go like, oh, this is what I really am interested in. I can, kind of skip forward to this spot. So I think that's really smart. That's awesome.
I'm the guy that asked you yesterday about the vacuum in your wall.
Yes.
What the hell?
So this is a newer house. My husband and I just moved here in October, and it has a internal vacuum system. So there's these little, hold on, let me grab my laptop and I can show you. Maybe. Thing is on enough. So I don't know if you're gonna be able to see it. Hold on, I have all these cords. Unplug that. There we go. Now I'm
I understand the cord stuff. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, cords everywhere. So there's these guys, and that's where the vacuum hose plugs in. And there are these all over the house. So it's really nice because you can just plug in the vacuum cord and vacuum your whole space. It's wonderful.
I love it and I hate it at the exact same time, because one of the issues with washer and dryers is that the dryer vents out, and then that ends up getting filled up and creating a fire hazard.
Right.
And I would worry about that with that system, but it would be the same kind of system, right?
No, it has a deposit system with a full filter system out in the garage that's 100% accessible. So we can go in and clean it on the regular, and we don't have to worry about things getting stuck or fire hazards or anything like that.
But if they extend through the wall, then you have to make sure that gets cleaned extra, because that's where you're going to find your fire hazard is in the wall outlets towards the filter.
Yeah. Yep. So all of that has its own filter system, so we can change it out regularly.
Okay.
So it makes it super, it's all very accessible and super easy. So it's been really nice. And then we have a little hand dust buster for the little spots if we don't want to bring the whole system down.
I need to make me I build Legos every now and then, so I need to make me a Lego vacuum.
Yeah.
And you would have to build an attachment for that, for a Lego vacuum thing, so it sorts and stuff.
Yep.
Yeah, that would be really cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, okay, so what do you do for a living? What you've said that to me that you have what's your degrees in?
So my degree is in sociology. I have an undergrad in sociology, and then I have a arts integration specialist certificate. So I've had training and have continued training in arts integration in pre-K through 12, like lesson planning and stuff. So essentially, I do a lot of work in both inner city schools, well, primarily with inner city schools, working to bring their core curriculum topics that they're expected to know and perform well in and all of that stuff, and integrate arts in a way that make that learning more accessible to a wider, like a broader learning audience. Because I think anyone knows that we don't all learn the same way. So, thank you.
The reason why that is so important to me, I come from McDonald County. There's a reason why nobody knows where the fuck that is.
I don't know where it is.
At one point in time, we were one of the biggest meth counties in the country.
Oh, okay. That's like the town I grew up in Oregon.
Yeah, Little Missouri, Southwest Missouri, literally on the exact Arkansas-Oklahoma border. The town Southwest Missouri was the opposite of I grew up on a highway out in the middle of nowhere between Powell and Jane. Somebody just did a video about the towns in Missouri that actually have child poverty. And they were like freaking a town 2 miles away from where I literally grew up. And it's like literally south of Joplin. So that's easier for people to see, understand. Joplin was like an hour away as a child. It's only like 30 minutes now from where I grew up. And I went to school a town away because the local school didn't actually have a junior high. So, and then that school that I grew up was, my grandparents lived around there, and my grandmother had a beauty shop and stuff in that town. So I was able to go out to school to that. So my brother is actually learning disability. I was labeled with a learning disability and kicked in the corner. My father told me a couple years ago, I'm in my 30s. So this actually pissed me off that I was not aware of this till then. That the teachers would actually talk about that I would understand the more advanced topics, but I would struggle with the basics. If you actually think about that, I was bored. If you're bored, things are easier to forget.
Yeah.
And so I was just kicked into a corner. The only reason why I even have a high school diploma is because I got a job and I was able to keep a job. And I showed up every 2 weeks to show a pay stub because I was learning disabled. I was able to do that. So nobody knew shit. So literally to me, they stole 10 years of my life because I went back I actually got friends to where I learned gambling techniques. And from gambling techniques, I actually learned physics through throwing dice. I learned a card count. I was very good with numbers. I was always good with numbers. Always. And so then I went back to school when I was 26. And because of a failed gambling trip, I actually read my first novel that wasn't a graphic novel, and that was The Black Hole Wars by Leonard Susskind, My Battle with Stephen Hawking to Make the Universe Safe for Quantum Mechanics. 430-some pages. Understood about 90% of it. So I switched from alternative energies, like solar panels and stuff I was going to do, because the community college was actually entered into some of those like driving programs for alternative energy cars.
Right.
That's how good they were with alternative energy stuff.
Nice.
So it's like, I should go to school for that. I switched to physics. So I have a bachelor's I have a associates in physics. And then when I went to University of Pittsburgh, Kansas, they were actually more like cheaper than the littler college in Joplin, Missouri Southern, and they have more master's programs. It's weird, but they are one of 9 schools that actually has polymer chemistry for undergrads. My advisor actually grows his own cancer cells to actually target them.
Oh,
they
interesting.
did computer programming to do Zika, to target Zika.
Yeah.
Ebola, they did studies with Ebola, anything you can think of like that. I need to do a video about cancer stuff for Brian Barchuk, because what I did is actually massively helpful for what he could do. What you do is you actually build like, we're talking about something that would be granule size. But when you look at it, like when you outline it on a deal, I need to go through it. It'll look like a soccer ball. And then you have, because cancer cells have actually, like, they should have different receptors. So what you're doing is you're actually creating a lock and key situation, because they'll have different dipole moments and different Linden forces and stuff like that, to where you actually build a molecule that will only attach to that receptor. And then you attach that onto the ends of the actual ball. And then inside that ball, you have to capture the chemo, the actual imaging and stuff. So then once it's sent through the body, imagine what happens. What do you think would happen?
Wouldn't it target the cancer cells, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So by biopsying the nerd did a video about Dr. Death.
Right. I saw that.
Dr. Death got the science right, but he fucked up on something. Because what he's talking about exactly what you would have to do in this situation. But he was talking about bacteria and animals and stuff. Well, by the time you do that, because you don't grow cancer cells to do all this experiment, because once you do the experiment, you destroy that cell, so you have to keep it growing to do it all right. He talked about it. Oh, well, you're supposed to do that, and then you give the antibiotics to that to figure out which ones work best. That would be great in theory, but yet by the time you actually get it done, the animal's dead from the bacteria infection. There's the issue with that. So doing it for cancer should be different. And so with Brian's being inoperable, it would actually shrink it. I've only found like one or two places that actually does this. It's called precision medication is the actual science stuff that it would be labeled under. But they would biopsy his, see if they could actually target it. Then they would actually, I don't have any idea how much it would cost. I don't know how long he would have to be on the pills, or if it would be an IV. I don't know. All I know is the science of how it works. Yeah. Because I couldn't get into, I got into grad school, but I couldn't finish because I didn't have the money.
Yeah,
so I left. And I also did studies in nonverbal human communication because I needed more financial aid. So I had to take on a second minor. So I went for communication, something that was easy for me. So it's like, okay, so that, and so, yeah, like I need to make a video on that because I think that would be important. And I just watched a video from the Young Turks where they were talking about a pancreatic cancer drug that in America is for a year's supply, $180,000. And it's like you can get it in other countries for like 3 to 6 times less.
Yeah, it was crazy.
It's like that's because if we can at least shrink it and keep it under control, we can at least give him a better way of life. And then he may have to take it for the rest of his life. But as long as it's not spreading and growing, he'll have probably a longer life expectancy would be the goal, and have a better quality of life. He won't be in so much pain. And that's but I don't know how expensive it is.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not a doctor, so I don't know. I know so little about any of that. I don't know what the best way forward, but I mean, it sounds like from what I've seen, like on his videos and stuff, he's really like fighting to do everything that he can to make it through.
And that's why I want to make that video, because I reached out on Brian Strong, but I haven't heard from him yet or anything. But so I'll want to make that video so I can explain exactly how the science actually works. Because literally, that is an actual science thing actually happened. Precision medicine's becoming more and more of a thing. There's a great story about a guy. Because precision medicine's very, very fascinating, and this does actually come back to reptiles, and we'll get to that here in a minute. But there was a gentleman whose son had a disorder that they couldn't diagnose. His son would cry nonstop, so he couldn't cry no more. Like, he literally was out of tears. Dad didn't have a voice, but he was still actually physically crying, even though he couldn't. And it was like 7 years. Doctors couldn't figure out what was wrong with him. So his dad actually took the genetics of himself and the mom, figured out where the son's genetic was missing from their combination, and then went through and figured out what drugs would affect it, figured out what drugs are on FDA's approved list, and then seeing what things have that drug in it. Prilosec.
Oh, interesting.
It was that was it.
That was it. Yeah, that's super simple.
But you had to go through all that to figure it out. Now, my understanding is he's the precision medicine in Georgia University.
Oh,
the last time I heard. I'm like, I love that story. Oh my God. That's why I went to school. That's why I switched to the polymer chemistry to do that.
Right.
Yeah. And now I work for a giant corporation doing agricultural science. I'm shocked at how much science isn't in that.
Yeah.
But, reptiles. There's things that there's so much left to learn. There's so many things that we can take away from it. The things that we need to take away from it right now, you understand as well as I do, that a female reptile takes more care than a male. Why the fuck would that not apply to women as humans? What I mean,
preaching to the choir here.
Yeah, I mean, what's your thoughts on that?
On
any of that?
On any of that? Oh, geez, I have a lot of thoughts on kind of women's care, women's rights, access to care, all of that stuff. I think it says a lot that the countries that have, something was correlated of countries with the highest, like, best contented people that lived in that country were also had the most women's rights, like lowest domestic violence cases, access to healthcare, access to women's care, all of that stuff. And I think that correlates for a reason.
And people don't understand how circular that actually is.
Yeah.
You know, the number one way to determine whether somebody will be a mass shooter, domestic violence.
Yeah, domestic violence and animal violence, like violence towards animals.
But that would make sense too.
Yeah. I mean, essentially just treating someone as lesser than because of gender, sex.
I want to restrain from, because something that most people don't understand, I have other videos where I do like talk to certain people that are in politics, or at least they're in like fields where they might have to deal with politics. because they're the herpetologist of states.
Right.
Like that. And I try to avoid talking about exact specific politicians. What people don't understand. So like I've asked Bill to be a guest host quite a few times, and I do not ask him for those videos because he's an actual family therapist. The thing is, when you have any type of government thing like that, it is actually an unwritten rule that you are not allowed to diagnose a politician.
Oh, interesting.
There's lots of people that actually get fired from actual roles for doing that. And it's unacceptable.
Yeah.
And so to protect people, I don't say this because I've got a video I've been wanting to make. I reached out to USARK Florida because I'm supposed to interview them sometime.
Oh, nice.
And I'm like, okay, so if I make this video, are you still going to be okay if it's going to cause a problem for you or not? Because I want to make sure that I'm not causing more issues for you if you come on an interview with me, which shouldn't be the case. That absolutely 100% should never be the case. Yeah. That is actually a fascist tool. I will say that 100%. And it is actually something that's practiced in the United States. And so I reached out and I'm like, okay, so you guys are going to be fine with doing the interview later. If I actually make this video, I have not made it yet. I have the intention of making it. And I study empathy. So somebody else's comment of I'm wrong on this topic, unless you've studied empathy, don't fucking comment. Because this person, I believe, is an actual real psychopath. Like an actual legitimate real psychopath. Not my ex-girlfriend's a psychopath. But a real psychopath. And they're only like 1% of the population and 33% of CEOs, which explains a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's one of those interesting things. So I don't want to get into that with you as deeply because I don't want to cause any issues since you work with school systems. So that means some government oversight. So we'll avoid that. And because I really want the audience to understand that happens. If you see somebody on the news making comments about somebody's psychological health that's a politician, understand that it is complete, utter bullshit. They are not an expert. Otherwise, they wouldn't be allowed on. That's the whole thing. So any news organization that has an expert is not actually an expert. They're not a real expert. They are not really trained properly. Because if they were, they wouldn't be allowed on. It's just one of those things. And we deal with politicians ourselves. What's happening in Florida is a big thing for that.
Right.
And so I know I've probably did way too much of that, but it's and I haven't even gotten to the question. At this point, I'm almost like I don't even know if I want to go over them. But what I do is I go over three things is my goal here. To understand in your individuality, I usually try to make something a joke at first for the audience. I will usually, that's why and that may be where I'm losing people is in that initial, right before the study. Because I think a lot of times we get really great answers that people would actually enjoy listening to.
But they drop off before they get there. Yeah,
and I think that's because, but as a study, I actually need to make sure that you're comfortable. And so that's why I usually, at first, I'll tell a joke. That's why at the beginning of the, Ryan McVeigh video, I actually talked about, because I think it's kind of funny. I came to the conclusion that, so the Ryan McVeigh, I went over the fact that I came to the conclusion that the only two things in this world that are even close to common sense is shitting and peeing. Not even peeing. Peeing is not even on there. Shitting is really it.
Yeah.
I think it's funny, and I think that hopefully that kind of lowers like I want people to be comfortable and be able to be open, and that's why I do that. I think you understand. I mean, it makes sense, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so then I would ask the person to tell a story. Any story you want. There is no wrong answer here. Just be detailed. And then it's a creative question, and then it's empathy questions, so I can find out where your empathy's at.
Mm-hmm.
So, you want to tell a story?
Oh, geez, a story. I always like blank out when I'm like, oh, I know I have to tell, but I don't know what.
Yeah, most people do.
Okay.
Most people. Okay.
So this has nothing to do with reptiles. Is that okay?
That's perfectly fine. It's your.
Okay. So this is a story of the most ludicrous pickup line that ever happened to me. And this was years ago. It was when my husband and I had first started dating. It was right after I'd moved to Maryland, which is where we were living when we first started dating. And I was driving to another friend's house. I was at a left turn light, and I thought I had stalled my car. I drive a stick shift, and I thought like it was subtle enough, but someone had rear-ended me, like just barely. And the guy like immediately jumped out of his car, came to my window, and was like, "Oh, are you okay? Are you okay?" I got out, checked my bumper. Like there wasn't even a scratch. He hit me so lightly, and I'm like, "No, it's fine. Like it's all good." And he insisted that we exchange information so he could, just in case something came up and I needed to like contact him for insurance. I'm like, who does this? And then sure enough, later on, like it was like a week or two later, I kept on getting texts from him from this number being like, "Hey, like, is your car okay? Are you sure you don't need anything?" And I'm like, dude, like, did you hit me on purpose to like get my number? It was so weird, but I'm pretty sure that's what happened. Because what other, like, I'm trying to rack my brain. I'm like, who else would voluntarily try and help you out with their insurance for a problem that doesn't actually exist? That's my story. The most ludicrous pickup line, I guess. Somebody hit me on purpose to get my number. What the heck?
Wow.
Yeah.
And see, that's why I never ask where you're at. Like, where are you living? Where is this? Where's that? Because I don't want people to find you.
Fair enough. Yeah.
That's not how this freaking works, guys. Oh man, there's a guy I worked at Domino's when I was finished schooling, and he would like actually hang out with the girls sometimes, and then he would come back and tell us about how they're dating, and then the first girl quit because they weren't dating. And so I hated this guy because it's something that I mentioned to people on the one episode. The worst people in the world are the ones that are insecure and can't get over it. Mm-hmm. Nothing to do with they could be a 10, they could be a 1 on looks. That is not where it's at. It's the insecurity part of it.
Yeah. It's tough because I don't know, maybe it's just too much empathy, like over empathizing, but just kind of trying to like help someone through something like that when it's not, I can't really, because it's their, like you were saying, it's just kind of their thing to figure out. Like I don't need to be involved in that because that can, I mean, it's happened often enough. It can become a very unsafe situation for someone very quickly.
Yes.
If you're not careful. So.
And that's the thing is like I offered that kid because I'm a hideous chud, but I'm okay. But yet I one of my biggest pet peeves, like my stepmom is like one of the greatest people, but she even uses this bullshit. It's one of because people don't give advice to help. They don't give advice for the person taking the advice. They give advice for the person giving the advice.
Right.
And so
They
she
give
says,
advice so they can be right.
so they can feel better about themselves.
Right.
Well, I gave you good advice, so I feel I'm better. I'm good. Like, I'm solid because I gave you good advice.
Yeah.
Did it help? The advice of be yourself. Well, who have you been? Why have you been somebody else? You haven't been somebody else? Then what the hell are you talking about?
Right.
And I've came down with a rule here for guys. If you truly believe that you have 3 or more women that would date you under different circumstances, then you have small changes to make.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't, you have bigger changes to make. And yes, you do 100% need to change. I offered that guy at the Domino's, I said, if you can stay for 1 week without complaining, I will help you with women. Because I may be a hideous chud, but I have more than 4 women at work that would date me. Because, and that's the thing, is the things that I talk about, I just talk about it with them. I am the most extroverted recluse you'll ever meet. And that's why, like, it's like I don't have any, like, women enjoy having deeper conversations. They don't want the boredom. The resting bitch face is actually a sign of boredom usually, and because who goes towards that? So it's really fascinating. So that's why I encourage guys to actually watch this podcast, because even though it's reptile related, no woman is going to get truly upset with you if she's a good person for having a passion.
Yeah, no, I don't think that's yeah, I mean, I think it also depends on the person, because, like,
Yeah.
we all have our own, like, there's definitely days when I am totally fine having very, like, small talk kind of, like, I don't want to get deep. I don't want to talk about anything that I have to think too hard about.
But you're probably not really bored those days, are you?
Mostly just tired.
Yeah.
I mean, I do have days where I don't think being bored is necessarily a bad thing.
No.
But I think there's certain, if we're talking about kind of picking up on behavioral cues, right? So if I'm talking to someone and I'm like, okay, they do the whole glazed over look, right? It's like, okay, you're not as passionate about this topic as I am, so maybe we need to shift it.
Yeah.
Kind of those kind of things I think are important. And I think that's, especially if you're like junior high or a teenager, even like early 20s, it's such a learning curve for some of us. Like it was for me. I was homeschooled as a child, so I had a lot of, and still do have, very awkward moments in public situations. I'm like, I don't know how to deal with this. I haven't learned how to deal with it normally, if there is a normal way to deal with it. But just little things like that, I think, are important when it comes to observing any kind of behavior, whether it's another human or an animal.
So I'm going to kind of direct this question a little bit for good reason. Me and Ryan McVeigh, we were talking about leadership. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that we see it more and more these days, the schoolyard rule. The more confident and the louder you are, the more people believe you. It's the classic schoolyard rule. The kid who's the loudest and the most confident is the leader. But that's usually a social learned skill, and it doesn't mean they actually understand the topic. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, I don't think that's necessarily true, honestly, just from my own experience. I think that works for some people. Like, some people really enjoy charisma over actual knowledge, right? And it could be that someone who's very knowledgeable also has that charisma, and that's kind of like that perfect combination for leadership. But I also think leading by example can be very impactful. So not even having to say, like, I believe and think blah, 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 blah. It's like, this is the actions that I'm taking to show that this is, I'm actually doing what I am saying, right? So kind of leading by action is I would say more people would be drawn to that than someone who's kind of screaming into the void with charisma, if that makes any sense.
Yes, actually. That actually came back to something me and Ryan were talking about when he was like, okay, so when you listen to people, when they come to your booth, and it's like you hear the people and they're like, okay, so then that person's actually more into the technical side, and so you need to talk to them more technically, whereas that person's talking about the animals more as a pet, so you need to be more empathetic, more
switch to the keeper mode instead of the and I think that's just picking up on those behavioral cues as you're communicating with people, and that circles back around to your like studies in communication, nonverbal communication. I mean, that's such a big part of any interaction is that nonverbal, and that's essential when it comes to reading these animals too, because that's all they don't have vocals. I mean, some of them do, but like not the same language that we speak. I
did a video reacting to Mike by Law by Mike, his videos on psychology of like what cops are trying to get from you through the psychology parts. And like, this is really how cops are trained, to make you uncomfortable. And then they call you a liar for being uncomfortable. Well, when you actually get down to it and you actually learn how to actually read body language properly, you basically only come down to 2 to 4 things. You can only tell. Like, if you keep it to these, you'll almost always be right. Comfort, discomfort, confidence, insecurity. If you keep to those 4 things, that's it. Like, it's not, oh, well, that's automatically a lie. That's no.
There's a spectrum there. Yeah, and that's also, I think that speaks volumes to like lie detector tests.
Yeah.
They're only accurate 50% of the time. They're not that accurate, because like I'm one of those people, I get very self-conscious very easily. And if I were to do a lie detector test, I can almost guarantee you that I would fail it, because I just, the assumptive that comes with the idea of needing to take a lie detector test will already increase heart rate and make most anybody feel very uncomfortable. And, you know, people who lack that empathy and are really good at lying are probably more likely to pass the lie detector test. It's just, it doesn't make sense.
That's
like
exactly right.
Yeah.
Cops are actually trained that way. That's not fiction. There's actually workshops that teach them to do that. And it's like, why is that legal?
Right.
It's like, but that actually goes back to animals too. When you're talking about an animal, don't talk about love, talk about comfort, discomfort, security, insecurity.
Yeah, I will talk about my love that I have for my animals. I'm like, do they love me back? Probably not. They behave in certain ways towards me and show me certain behavioral cues that show me that they feel safe and comfortable, which is all I ever want. But if you're looking for something to express love and affection like a dog would or another human would, it's going to be a very different experience for you keeping something like a snake, which you can see him up on his glass now.
I make is he?
Yeah, he's awake. You can see his face moving around. Yeah, he's exploring.
That's great.
Did you
love it. Yeah, I explain the difference between a dog and a reptile as my grandparents. My grandmother, beauty shop, never cussed. We could never do anything wrong. She was a saint and just loved us no matter what. That's a dog.
Right.
That's what a dog does. Reptiles are my grandfather. You earn that love. That is earned. And I think that's something we don't understand. Why does reptiles mean so much to us? Because we earned it.
Right. And I think it's one of those things, like I've seen the side of keeping where it's like, okay, I can never, like, I won't offer trust to an animal until they show that they trust me. And for me, it's actually the opposite. Like, I need to show them that I am someone that can be trusted. So they are willing to interact and communicate with me on some level. So I think if I don't trust them and continue to not trust them until they trust me first, it's like, I don't know. It seems like a big ask to ask something like a snake to trust you before you say, okay, now I can trust you. Like that's a big ask. You're caring for that animal. Like you need to show that you trust them first, and then that changes their perspective, I feel like.
I have a question. Law by Mike said this a couple times. When have you seen this? When the hell? Yeah, the steeple. He talked about if you're comfortable in an interrogation room, and you're not lying, you'll be doing this. Oh,
interesting.
I'm like, no. Like, seriously? The thumbs up is confidence. If you're in an interrogation room, they're trained to make you uncomfortable. So therefore, if you're comfortable and your thumbs are up, something's wrong.
Something's wrong, yeah. Interesting.
And so this right here, this steeple, he kept mentioning it, and it's like the only time I've ever really thought about this is in meetings. So this is not, he called it a natural reaction. I'm like, I don't think this is natural. I think this is something somebody does, because you actually get trained this way in communication classes because you don't want to point to people. So you like that, like, okay, so don't.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so it's like that. So this is something that's actually, if they're making this, it's probably conscious, not subconscious.
I know I do. Like, I've seen myself in videos doing this when I'm like thinking or processing, but it's not like it's not an action that I do intentionally, if that makes sense. It's just a mannerism.
That's okay. That actually tells me something. Because I've kind of seen my hands do this, but I never do the actual steeple. But yet when I walk with my thumbs up. If my hands are in my pocket, my thumbs are out. This is one way that, so somebody might actually look at these videos and go, well, this guy's not attractive. He's not this. He doesn't sound the greatest. So they might turn off for that, not realizing that in the real world, I am absolutely thumbs up.
Yeah, I mean, being in front of a screen automatically, I think, shifts things for people. Yeah. Like when I was teaching during COVID, when all the schools were shut down, we were doing everything virtually. And like my poor fifth graders were just most of their screens were off. And people were trying to be like, make them turn their screens on. And I'm like, no, like if they're not comfortable in front of the screen, like, are you comfortable in front of the screen? Like, I know, even especially when I was in fifth grade, there's no way in heck I would have been comfortable in front of a screen. It's a learning curve, and we got to let them kind of readjust.
That reminded me of something I wanted to bring up with you. And I was watching the video, like so many of these people giving advice on YouTube don't know a fucking thing. They are divorced from reality. And it's like, are you freaking shitting me? I wanted to bitch slap this guy. If I was standing in front of him, I think I would have punched him in the face.
Oh, no.
Because it was just so stupid. And it was like, okay, so he's talking about that people need to actually send their kids to charter schools. Or charter schools or private schools. I think it was private schools. And he actually said, okay, so if you're making $75,000 a year or $100,000 a year, you need to get a second job to send your kids to private school. I'm like going, what? Like, no. Yeah, the school system's failing us, but that's actually something the government's doing on purpose to send us to private schools. So I'm
just curious what his reasoning was behind offering that advice, or if he had any. I don't know.
Like that was just, it was so, because over 60% of the population of the United States do not make $40,000 a year.
Yeah.
What the hell are you talking about? 75,000 or 100, and you need to get a second job? Like, seriously?
I mean, it's a, yeah.
But I love the comments, because there was at least 2 of them that were threads about homeschooling.
Mm-hmm.
And the one's like, oh my God, I'm going to send my kids to homeschool. I've already been doing it. This is the curriculum. Like they're doing it this way. And we've got a parenting group that actually does it together. And it's like, okay, I'm all right with that. The next one's like, okay, so this 18-year-old girl, when he was in college, who had been homeschooled, is actually doing the tutoring for calculus.
Yeah.
I'm like, I love it so much.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of different options out there as far as schooling goes. And I think providing the fact that that's actually out there, like you have homeschooling, you have different resources in the public school system. If you are privileged enough to be able to afford private school and want to go that route, awesome, go you. Just don't expect everyone else to do the same thing you do. Same with like, I went to college. I don't expect everyone to go to college. It's expensive. It is expensive, and it also isn't for everyone. Like it's
I've
not
met people that were genius that never spent a day, and yet people that are like retarded that actually have degrees, like really meaningful degrees in science. Mm-hmm. I was like, wow, oh my God, that kid that actually was like talking to the girls the way he did at Domino's. He switched to polymer chemistry, and he literally kept telling us that cooking isn't chemistry.
I don't know. I don't know. So my thing with that, because it's so easy to get frustrated with things like that obviously don't make a whole lot of sense. But I find if someone is happy thinking that way and doesn't have any interest in your side of things, I've gotten to the point where I'm like, you know what? I don't control you. There's very little in life that I actually control. So I will focus on those and take actions on those and let everything else go, because it's not worth, for me personally, it's not worth my energy to try and change something that I don't control. So my self-preservation and my own sanity in trying to help people understand, like for snakes, for example, a lot of people think snakes are horrible and they bite all the time and they're evil and all of this stuff. And I'm like, okay, I'm not going to go in and tell you that you're wrong, even though you are, right?
Yeah.
But instead, I'm going to share with you my perspective of these animals instead of trying to, because people, again, like going back to that whole feedback thing, like telling you are wrong, you will automatically shut down and won't want to have any sort of interaction. But if I share with you my interaction with these animals and my perspective and my viewpoint, then maybe that will help you, even if it just plants a little seed, like eventually come back around and be like, oh my gosh, I saw a picture of a snake and I actually thought it was cute.
We'll
Why
talk
do I
about
think
that.
Now? Yeah,
the little seed thing. For that guy, I offered to help him, and that was as far as I was willing to go, because I understand that he has to fix himself. There's nothing else I can do.
Yeah,
you have to understand that. When I had several people on that started Facebook pages, like the girl that started Snake Discovery fan page.
Yeah,
I had her on and stuff, and like I was talking to them and I was explaining, okay, so a lot of what's happening online is probably because most of these people aren't actually getting enough satisfaction out of life outside of it. So then when you get into reptiles and you get that satisfaction of what we were talking about earlier, where it's like they're the hard parent, they're the ones that bond with it, like you've earned it.
Yeah,
that goes into self-satisfaction. So now if they're wrong, then were they wrong all the time? Are they actually not doing it correctly? It's ideology's a shit brick house with no mortar. If you pull on one brick, they think the whole thing's going to collapse. And one of the things that I saw later on was one of those people actually tried to almost like use that like when somebody was criticizing them, they were like, well, you must be having a bad day. I want to make sure that we're okay. Like they were like almost trying to fix it. And I'm like, I love the thought, but you can't fix it. And
right. Yeah.
I was like, like it was, I felt so bad.
Yeah. But especially on a social media platform, it's like, yeah, I liked that what you said, like about idolization. Like it's like putting someone up on a pedestal. The higher you put them, the harder they fall whenever they do fall, and they will eventually, because they're not a god, they're not a goddess, they're not some deity, they're a human being, and we all make mistakes. And because they're so visible now, if they make the same mistake you or I would make, it's a much bigger problem than it actually is, because people have put them up on a pedestal and their own expectations have let them down, right? So you expect this person that you idolize to behave and act a certain way, and when they don't, you're upset. But it's not because of that person, it's because of your own expectations.
Yeah. Oh my God, yes. Like more and more, like because of the way I was raised, I learned in the 6th grade that I would probably never be the guy in front of everybody. But I could definitely be the guy behind. I'm learning disabled, but I had that epiphany in the 6th grade.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah, it's like.
I also think there's so many negative connotations around, like we use the term differently abled, right? Yeah. And I think all of us are.
I love it, and I hate the term neurodivergent. Right. I love it because it's accurate, but the condensation is to automatically use it just as a transfer over of you're autistic.
Right.
And it's like I don't like that part.
Yeah, I think there needs to be like it's a hard thing, because it's something people are finally acknowledging, like, oh, you're autistic, or you're a person that is not me, so therefore you think and process things differently than I do. And I think that's going to be the way forward. And it's the whole idea of labeling, right? Yeah. Like you are different than us, so therefore we need to put a label on it so we know where you fit into society or what have you. And I think that's where the problem comes in. It's not about the labels. It's about learning each other's communication, little mannerisms and stuff, and being able to interact and help each other.
When it comes to the school system, I just can't think about what I could actually have done in those 10 years with mathematics, because I was always good at math. Always. I was the guy that helped other people out in high school. And like I kept making like a B plus. Like it would, at the very last moment, I would miss just enough to make a B plus.
Right. And so that also comes down to testing practices, which is very different than someone's actual knowledge base, because how you perform on a test isn't a direct reflection of your knowledge.
I was the guy in chemistry that helped everybody else out, but I was working at Lazy Boy 4 o'clock in the afternoon to 2:30 in the morning, Monday through Thursday, doing a factory job. And so every single person that I helped made a B or better. I was a C average student. Yeah. And I was the go-to guy for help. It's insane. But
it's interesting. And it's, again, like, I know that there needs to be some way of, there's so many people applying for grants and applying for college entrances and all of that stuff. I just feel like there's got to be a better way than just looking at numbers. Yeah. Like, this person has the highest number, so therefore here you go.
Yeah. There's more to that. Like, I had a school bully. I had an intellectual bully in college. I would never hire that guy. I can find 10 other people that could do the same thing he can, that will not create anywhere near the issues that he created, that he would create. And then on top of that, everything he knows is just book smarts. There is nothing else to that guy than book smarts. And yet he was adored on. And that's a problem in college is you get those guys and then they go, well, I have to be the smartest person in the room. That's where they're you can break everybody down to one question. What makes them feel self-important? And when their self-importance is tied into being the smartest in the room, nobody else could ever learn. So therefore they can't really truly grow. They actually become bad professors. And yet that is often a professor that you get in college because they will succeed because they have very high book knowledge.
Yeah, maybe they just were never asked the right question to help them.
Yeah, no, they were just told that. And that's something that studies have actually showed us with children is they do adapt to what we suggest them to be. So if all you're doing is saying, hey, you need to be smart, or you're smart, you're really smart, then that's their takeaway is I have to be the smartest person, otherwise nobody will respect me. Whereas if you say hardworking, you're a hard worker, people want to work harder because it's like that. It's actually studies that have showed that.
Right.
And it's one of those things. I've been meaning to have Bill back on and do those talks about the children stuff in like later episodes. There's a guy who uses his daughter in his YouTube videos. She's like 5 or 6, and he actually has her like say some of the stuff, like actually, and so she's learning, and I love that part of it.
That's awesome.
So
yeah.
I was going to have him on, and we were going to do that. That's an episode that I would like to do. But okay, so the next questions that I often ask, I know this is really not how this usually goes. I usually try to make it more structured.
No worries. I do. If we can, like, maybe try and wrap this up in like 30 minutes, if that would be
Yes,
possible.
actually, no, that's great. That's great.
Cool.
And
Cool.
so a lot of what you've said, I might like just bypass the whole thing because I don't think it's as important, because basically I can pull stuff, and that's when you actually listen to people, it's like, so I don't really know exactly where your empathy's at, but there's a reason for the creative deal, is because it's kind of come to my conclusion that to really be great at putting yourself in other people's shoes, especially like something like an animal, you really have to have it be part of your imagination. It really needs to connect to it. And so you actually see that in answers. But I've only seen like 3 people have it. Bill Stewart was not one. And he's an amazing guy. I love the guy to death. Like, he's just awesome. So it was really Ryan McVeigh, I wouldn't say necessarily I put an asterisk by him. He's not in either of those categories. But Bill seems more normal almost. Like his answers and nobody that I've ever had on is a psychopath. Nobody even close, because you wouldn't come onto my show if you were a psychopath. I'm not big enough, and I don't have enough recognition for a psychopath to care. So nobody that's been on is for that. So, and neither would a narcissist. And so that's not, so these people do have empathy. They have nice empathy, regular empathy. We just see that it's not abnormal. And so it's really fascinating when you get down to that. And so that's why I ask the creative question usually, like, what's the most creative thing you've done? And so we get an idea of how you see creativity. I don't think it's really led to anything, but I think it was an important topic to try to see if we could pull something out of. And then I ask people to give me the day in the life of their animal. Like, how do you like that? And this is where Ryan McVeigh said later on that I need to make a smaller clip of. This is just absolutely fantastic. This is why he gets an asterisk. He takes the camera, his flexible camera, and sends it through the enclosure, every pipe and everything. And since he has the technology to see the different lights, he actually tries to figure out exactly how his animals are seeing in the enclosure itself. Oh my God, that's an engineer's look at empathy.
Yeah, it's really cool. His whole viewpoint on and like curiosity about animals and how they interact with their environment is amazing. Like,
we talked about anthropomorphizing and why some of it's correct. An episode that I want to do, Bill, that I actually have people that I should be doing this with soon, hopefully, that they actually sell products that people dress the reptiles with.
Mm-hmm.
Bill Stewart at the St. Louis show, I was talking to him, and he's like, well, I would really love to know how somebody that puts a hat on a beardy, what's their empathy? It's like, okay, I think I have the answer already. I think I understand the answer already, but I'm going to have like people that actually sell those products on. I have 2 people, and so that would do that for me and come on and go over this with them and try to figure that out, what their empathy is like. And I think it's a fascinating subject, and then talk about beardy moms with them. I'm a beardy mom. I'm 100% proud of being a beardy mom. Freaking, I'm calling you out right here. I was on the Reptile Fight Club podcast. And I was talking, I was the guy who was talking about, is it about the keepers or the actual animals?
Right.
And is it about the keepers or the kept? And later on, he talked about somebody using a stroller and their reptile. I have outfitted a stroller to walk my 3 bearded dragons in the sun. I live in a shitty apartment that has this is the square footage of grass I have in this shitty ass apartment.
Right. Yeah. There's not.
So I take them down to the local lake and I walk them around.
That's awesome. I mean, they've got to get some sort of.
Yeah, and I do it safely.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that was the point of the video.
If you have 3, like that's a hard ass to walk 3 on like a harness or something. That's, I feel like, getting them in a stroller. Like, one, you can probably walk faster, so it helps you out, so you don't have to wait for them, but also just kind of keeps them contained.
Yeah. And then after a couple of hours, you see them get darker. After a couple hours, they will actually hide from the sun, and I have spots for them to do it.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. See, and that's the important thing, because like I'm definitely if I see like a tegu or a bearded dragon in a hat, I will look at it and be like, oh my gosh, that's so adorable. But I probably would never, like, all of the reptiles that I personally own, we have 1 leopard gecko, but she's basically my husband's. All of the animals that I own, as far as reptiles go, are snakes. And I would love to own a tegu eventually, but I don't think I would love to teach it to walk on a harness, and like all of that kind of fun, more like 4-legged, friendly reptile kind of stuff. But I don't think I would ever like put a hat on it. Not necessarily because it's bad. I don't think it's necessarily inherently bad. It's just that animal can't tell me how they feel about it, and it's hard to pick up on behavioral cues.
Yeah.
So it's like, I just choose not to. But no judgment on people who do like to do that.
And I love freaking Bill Stewart and Ryan McVeigh. Ryan McVeigh was very vocal against it.
Right.
And that's one of those things that we're going to talk about on that episode. And we're going to discuss things, and we're going to put it more into a better perspective. I think like that. And so that's one of those things that I want to do. I want to do a trauma episode.
That would be good. Yeah.
I think I got PTSD when I lost my first bearded.
Oh, yeah.
And Retic Lounge, that guy's a trauma, one of those guys apparently is a trauma.
It's Lucas. He's a trauma
therapist.
Therapist. So I'm going to open up his door really quick because
go for it.
He's exploring, so I'll see what's about.
And I would like to have him on the show for that. And maybe Bill Stewart for the trauma. Yeah. And then I had the absolute greatest idea last night. So I don't usually take taxis. And so I had to take a taxi for this one because of the car situation.
Right.
And so I talked to everybody. And I was talking about my podcast eventually and stuff with this guy, really super nice guy. And he's like, well, I've done a little bit of study in psychology. I would love to guest host. Like, I was like, do you have reptiles? No. okay, that's a little weird, but that has led me to something interesting. And I have been trying to think of a game show idea. Now, with the new things, because I think we all know where I stand. I don't think I even have to vocalize it on the issue of rack system argument that's happening right now. I just got done talking about neuroscience a while back. I think we all know where I stand on this topic. I don't think we need to go into that. It's pretty obvious. Yeah, it's that thing. And so, what if we brought on people who do not own a reptile, especially if they're afraid of reptiles or spiders or something, and we bring on breeders or rescues and have them sell them on the idea of owning one, at least. And so we get to see the marketing side, so that people who are actually marketing can actually learn to talk better about these topics. And then we actually get answers from people who don't actually. So we actually have, and in a fun way. So people that don't own reptiles will be like, I have that exact question. Now that I just got an answer to it. Okay. Like that.
Yeah, I also think they would have questions that maybe for us that love these animals and keep these animals, we wouldn't think of asking.
Exactly.
So that would be, I think that would be a really great. I think that's great. Yeah.
And then have them fill out a survey at the end to grade them. And then another grading is that the participants get two options. They can either take a box of like supplies, like I don't know what I would put in there yet, because like maybe like regular stuff like toilet paper, toothbrush, toothpaste, something that's actually usable in the home, maybe with a $25 gift card somewhere, or a coupon book for like enclosures, feeders, reptile supplies.
Yeah.
And let them choose, so we can actually see where they're really at the end of the day. I think that would be great. And I think that would actually lead to a lot and be a game show way of showing this. And so it's fun and exciting, and it would get more people involved, and it would show off the hobby in a different light.
Right.
I think that would be pretty cool, don't you?
Yeah, I think it'd be fun to see the perspective of people who either don't like reptiles or are afraid of them, or I think it would be really interesting, people who assume that because you keep reptiles, it's the whole idea of like, oh, you're keeping a wild animal in a cage kind of idea. It's like, okay, let's shift that, and we can actually show you what it's actually about.
I want to see also the ethical sides to the marketing.
Yeah.
I want to see how they handle that. So we can actually do that. That's really like how do you convey that this is actually a good thing for you if you have the right materials? Are they like, well, you can just get a rack system, or are they like, can you get a bigger enclosure? Like, are they like, how are they actually going to present this? Like having Garrett Hartle on there. Well, you don't want a super dwarf to go through freaking a brand new keeper. So
no, and that's the other thing. That's what I was about to say, is kind of going through and vetting the person asking about the animal and actually making sure that they're
that's ethics.
Fit for this animal that you're curious about. Because I've definitely talked to people who are like, oh, I really want a retic, and I'm like, I always follow that up with like, oh, really? Like, what about them intrigues you? Like, why do you want one?
I love the question.
They're not for everyone. Like people who have ball pythons and they love their ball pythons. They're like, I love just sitting on a couch and they'll watch a movie with me, and I love that. I'm like, okay, cool. Yeah. If you are expecting that from a retic, that's not a retic. Like they take a lot more. Like
something you did there is something that I preach. If you're not willing to ask a question to the person, then you're not actually trying to help.
Right. Yeah.
You're just trying to make yourself feel bad. Well, I helped. I told.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's just people with ball again, kind of that same, going back to the ball python thing, because they're just so popular and pervasive, and like everyone who gets an animal, a lot of them, their first time owning a snake is a ball python, which is great. I think they're awesome animals, but I've never owned one. I've never owned a ball python. So when people are like, oh, how do reaches compare to ball pythons? I'm like, I can't answer that honestly because I don't have any experience with them. Here's how my retic behaves. You can.
I like Mike Stefani's answers when somebody in Texas asks him about freaking monitors. He goes, I don't know because the climate's different there, that it makes their behaviors different.
Yep. It's the same like with Ryan and UVB. Like if you had an animal not on UVB its entire life and you're giving it UVB, the behavior might quite possibly change and you're going to have to re-get to know that animal.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things. It's like, are you willing to sacrifice that comfort level that you have with that animal for that animal's health? For me, it's a no-brainer. Like, yes, like the animal's health over everything. If it decides it doesn't want to interact with me anymore because it now has UVB and is happier in its enclosure, awesome. That's fantastic. Like, so
how well do you think? Oh, another topic that I want to cover on this channel. I want to bring on people because I was thinking about it the other day, a while back, when I was thinking about having people on that have rack systems, like massive rack systems, testing their empathy. And it's like, okay, so we often talk about like the mental health issues. So it's like, well, addiction. Okay, so looking into addiction, I started watching PH is on YouTube talk about addiction, and I started thinking about going, no, this is hoarding. And so I actually watched some videos from PH people who actually study hoarding, and they're like, animal hoarding's different. So I want to bring them on, somebody like that actually has a rescue that I heard about, an animal rescue, and somebody like Bill Stewart, so we can understand the difference up there compared to here, and we can actually talk about and get a better understanding of hoarding and the hobby. I think that's an appropriate thing. And I think that would definitely go into psychological studies into herpiculture.
Yeah. I think the tough part would be people willing to go on to something like that because.
Oh, no. See, this lady already talks about it. So therefore, and then we're not, see, that's the other thing is I was talking about trying to make people comfortable. If you ever listen, if I actually say something that's like, no, you're a fucking shitty person, I am calling specifically on somebody that I don't want on. And so with the rack system debate, yeah, I'm on one side, but I'm not judgy. I'm not I try my damnedest not to be judgy because it doesn't help.
Yeah, and it doesn't help them either, I feel like.
Exactly.
I have seen, there's a lot of people who have been keeping racks that I've seen start to work on downsizing and upgrading, which I think that's the direction the hobby is going, especially as more and more breeders are more willing to vet keepers and people who are interested in their animals instead of just be like, cool, you have the money, here's the animal kind of thing. Kind of
ever evolving pythons. I watched an episode with him where he was talking about the death of his rattlesnake. And it's just like,
is that the one that got stuck?
Yeah, he was just up. And I'm like, I want this guy on so we can actually, so I don't want to pass judgment because I don't know. I've never had somebody on that has like a massive rack system. So where is their empathy? Like, I don't know. That's why I'm testing. I don't want to throw judgment out there till I test. And I think that's a fascinating deal. What do you think so far about what I'm doing? What's your thoughts? Where could I improve? How could I improve this channel? Just anything in general.
I think you have a lot of really good like knowledge and curiosity about like neurological function in animals and how we as humans are interacting with them and responding to them, and that whole idea of like empathy and how are we applying anthropomorphism through that empathy or not as keepers, and how does that affect the animal. Yeah,
Don't let me forget. Sorry. I don't want to forget this. It was something I was talking with Ryan McVeigh. I actually had a friend of mine, like that actually watched that video, which most people don't finish my videos. I was really I loved it. They were like, it's such a great idea. Such a great idea. And, okay, so you were talking about the other day, I've already mentioned this in some of my channel stuff, but you were talking about on the podcast, like another one where it's okay, so you need to set the idea and just let it mold.
Plant the seed,
yeah. So it's leading the horse to water and convincing it needs a drink, that it thinks it needs a drink instead of telling it needs a drink.
Yeah.
So with anthropomorphizing these animals, I talked about this with that. I'm more autistic than artistic, so I haven't figured out how to make this happen. But it was like with the gecko here, my Peter Bandit skink. He comes out and stays in the sun because he's got a positive feeling from that because he had bacteria build up, and that's like a fever.
Yeah.
So if I made a small short that's a cartoon, because I think of cartoon with the BoJack Horseman, not so the more serious the topic, if you make it into a cartoon, it separates it out that little bit to where it's more digestible.
More engaging for,
So if we had a person that had a fever and stuff.
Keep talking, I just got to go fetch my retic because he crawled over here. Yeah, but I can still hear you.
Okay. Yeah. So if we made a person with a fever and they had a thermometer in their mouth, and then switch to my Peter Bandit skink out in the sun, no commentary, no nothing like that, just the animal itself like that, and then just make that short and put it out there.
Right.
Making shorts like that. And I think that is anthropomorphizing, but in a positive way.
Yeah, I think it's just, I don't even know if I would call that anthropomorphizing. I think it's just trying to parallel something that's more relatable, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so it's not saying I don't know, what would an anthropomorph, this animal is feeling just tired and depressed because it's sick. That would be anthropomorphizing, because we don't really know. Obviously it's not feeling 100% because of its behavior.
There is studies that suggest that they do go through seasonal depression.
Yeah, not saying that there is not, but just in that particular. But yeah, I think that would work really well.
We could show that in an actual short little clip, and I think that would lead to more engagement, and that's like the planting of the seed.
Yeah, 100%.
But I haven't figured out how to do that myself.
Yeah, I wouldn't know how either. I'm not good at animation.
I remember I watched the episode of Anthropomorphizing, and you did the drawing with Ryan McVeigh. I watched that episode.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, that was a really good conversation with him. I really enjoyed that.
And that's why I made sure to ask him. That was something I brought up on that deal. I'm like, okay, so the anthropomorphizing, you said it was kind of a positive thing. What led you to that conclusion and stuff like that? But no, what do you think? How could I improve this podcast?
I mean, I think it's stuff that you already have mentioned, kind of having a more lined out, this happens and this happens and this happens kind of thing. But I think
of which we did originally.
Yeah. We
did actually originally have that. So I do that, especially when I have the herpetologists on. It's structured. It is. They are not, one thing that you'll learn about herpetologists it's a job. So they're not here to be buddy. They're here to get their message, their deal. And that's fine. And so, and I enjoyed this type of thing. I can do it either way. I've only done one live because this is a study. And my live was because I needed to introduce my Peter Bandit skinks together.
Right.
And I tried to make it a fundraiser. So I had 3 sisters on.
Oh, nice.
The local rescue. So we made them $50.
Yeah. Oh,
It's
awesome.
like, okay, so that's great. I love it.
He's so adventurous. He has his routine. I let him out. He comes out, and then he just patrols the snake room. But there's a couple, like, he can get up the stairs and he can get behind a couple enclosures. He usually doesn't, but when he's headed that direction, I'm like, let's not.
Yeah, talking about stress and stuff, I hear so many people, well, that stresses them out. It's like, yeah, but if you have no stimuli, then you have no stress.
Stimulus,
those go together.
No.
So if you have any stimuli, then there's potential for stress.
Sure. But if you get I mean, that's one of the reasons I get like he's always been this way. He's just curious, and like, so I don't know if you saw, like, I potential controversial topic, but I don't use a hook generally to get him out, because he just comes out on his own, and I know his behavioral cues enough that if I do need to use a hook, I will use a hook on him. But like for my babies and stuff, I'll get them out and interact with them. And they're more like suspicious at first, but you can feel it when they drop into like, oh, this is I'm safe. I can now explore and be curious. And it's really good enrichment for them, in my opinion.
Oh, yes.
From my experience.
Yeah. If it wasn't for the mold and stuff in this apartment, I would let them out more.
Oh yeah. Yeah. That's something you don't want to mess with, for sure.
Yeah. And so I was actually starting to do this with Ryan. I don't know if we need to do this with this video. Like, what's the main takeaway, or have you learned anything, or what would you want the audience to be like, to watch this video for?
I mean, it seems like the kind of primary thread throughout this whole conversation has been objective empathy, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like being willing to take a step back and take yourself out of the equation as much as possible and observe, but also be curious and empathetic to those behavioral cues that you're receiving.
Awesome. We didn't get to finish this question. I had this as one of the last things. Can you give us a real quick reason why people, and we've actually done this over the video, we've actually given reasons why people should care, why the reptile industry should care about the politics and social issues?
I mean, I think we've seen it in action in Florida, people getting their animals taken away. And for me, the thing that's most important for me personally in actively supporting USARK and what they are doing for us is helping to get the message across of what these animals and owning these animals is all about, and clearing out that misunderstanding and those assumptions from people who don't own these animals.
Yeah.
And just showing them like they're well taken care of, they're happy, they are healthy, they're thriving, and the community is actually doing a lot for conservancy. And like
there's a couple things that I would say. One, as long as people are more worried about where their bed is and where they're getting their water, they're not going to worry about conservation.
Yeah.
They're too stressed out for that. So you have to get them to a level where they're not so stressed, but a level that's not, oh, well, we need to make more money. There's a volume here that you need to hit.
It's the hierarchy of needs, so they can get out of survive mode into being able to actually think about things mode.
And two, when we talk about like gun laws and a lot of things like that, it's like the argument, even this, I think there should be a law for licensing, even for a bearded dragon, for reasons. And the pushback that I've gotten is lawmakers will go further afterwards. Even for a good law like that, they'll still go further.
Yeah, amendments are super easy after a law is put into place.
Yeah, and so my deal is that we are not the common people. So therefore, it will be super easy to other us. So if they're othering other people in any way, shape, or form, you are next. We are not concluded from that. Right. So I've had people in the industry who do actually also want to punch down and other people and support that type of thinking. And it's like, do you not realize that when you do that, you put yourself at risk for what you're doing? Because who's next?
Yeah.
Because they don't stop. Power doesn't stop.
Yeah.
Power tries to get more power. And that's one of the things. The last thing I wanted to ask, this was one of the biggest reasons why I wanted you on before other people, because I would love another episode I want to do is with Ron St. Pierre. I need to get a hold of him and do an episode for April Fools on more gaming and reptiles.
Nice.
But I think it would help. It's the reason why I keep trying to get Bill on, because he's probably going to have more insights than I might. I would love to have a co-host for some of these things.
Yeah.
Would that be something you would be interested in? And you could say yes to some, no to some others, if it's a topic that you want. And what topics would you like to see me tackle like that?
Oh, geez. There's so many good topics out there.
And that's the thing, is I don't know them all. So this...
Yeah. I mean, I think like the whole bioactive enclosure conversation is a wonderful one. People always have lots of questions about that, whether they should, whether it's safe, how to do it, what the different ways to do it is. So that's really good.
I on my quarantine videos, I show people how to like tell if an animal has mites. Mm-hmm. Just a rag, just a white rag.
Yeah. Or paper towel.
Yeah. Like I just use a baby wipe that's unscented and just get over every inch of them and everything that I can do. And then like, you'll see it. Like it comes up pretty clear. Yeah. It's things like that. And so when you're talking about snakes and bioactive, it's really fascinating because the snakes, it's different, because if a lizard gets bit by a bug, they can just eat it. Mm-hmm. A snake gets bit by a bug, it's different.
Yeah, are you talking about like snake mites or things that
mites or anything? Mm-hmm. Anything. A buddy of mine that are not breeders, but they sell. They lost two small snakes. I couldn't tell you this. I'm not a snake guy. The nonverbals, they're interesting. They're just not interesting enough for me.
Fair enough. Yeah.
And that's the thing. It's like, I know where I stand. I know what I like. I have an emerald swift. It's supposed to be a throwaway lizard. I just posted a video on my Instagram where I show him leaping and eating out of my hands. Like, I love that guy now. Like, he's so smart. It's like, I love it.
Yeah, little things can definitely make a difference.
And he's a throwaway. He's supposed to be a throwaway lizard.
Aw. For
most people, it's, you know, they're like anoles. So it's like, no, like I said, I would love to have a co-host, somebody that could actually bring something more to the table. And I loved that when I called it something, and like, because one thing that I oh God, the podcast you were on, for some reason I'm just completely drawing a blank right now.
Was it the Reptile Studio podcast one?
Yes. Yeah. Those guys. I love those guys. They're to me, they're killing it. Yeah. But I know that they don't have a lot of views as much as they'd like, but I don't often see them push back on people, and that's okay. As you can see, I am more than happy to push back, but I try to push back in a polite way. That's like, okay.
Yeah, I don't think it's necessarily.
And you did the same to me.
Yeah, I don't think it's necessarily bad to disagree or have different opinions. I don't know a single person who thinks has the exact same opinion on everything that I do. And thank goodness, because that would be really boring.
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. So when you were like, no, I don't think this would be qualified as anthropomorphizing. I think you would qualify it as something different, and then it leads to that thinking. Yeah. I love that. Like, I'm like, okay, no, that's great. Like, that's you know, I had Ryan McVeigh when he was on, and it's like, well, you know, my issue with the idea of the animal is like automatically knowing, boy, Hydra's really trying to get that shit off. He has just got the wiggles. Yes, I just said your name. I was editing a video once, and he knows the word good boy. it means I get a treat.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, he literally will like freak out, and you go, "Good boy," and he'll calm down.
Oh.
And so, in the video, I keep saying it, and so he doesn't know the difference. He doesn't know that I'm not actually saying it.
Mm-hmm.
He's just hearing it. And so he looks, he's like staring at me. So I say something, and he automatically jumps over to the rock I usually feed him on.
That's
it's like,
cute.
I have to give you a worm for this. Like, it's like, yeah, it's like, all right. Yeah. But yeah, it's, so I said, okay, so I've seen it because I have UVB and grow lights in all my enclosures, and I separate them. And I have seen them when they first interact with a grow light or a brand new grow light, they don't automatically go for it. They see it. I'm okay with that. But it's when they finally get under it and they realize, oh no, this is giving me something different. So it must be a physical feeling. And then they take in that it's light. So now it's physical feeling that's positive, and the light. So I would say that it's probably a physical interaction that dampens over time, just like any neurological positive feelings that go into your brain.
Yeah.
And you would think I was like being, I don't think anybody took it as I was being rude. I'm just being realistic. And I'm saying, okay, so I challenge you for that, but it's not being rude. It's like literally, this is my thinking.
Yeah, I think I refer to that as pushback.
Yeah.
And I think that's so important. And I love it when people push back, because it makes me reprocess and be like, okay, let me think about this. And like, we do extensive like race equity training in the job that I work at. And you have to be willing to, one, take a huge slice of humble pie continually as you learn to grow, and also be willing and also start, like, I've shifted into seeking out that pushback. Be like, hey, this is what I'm thinking. Is this okay? Like I need a different perspective on this, because there's a whole lot of social static from growing up in a white society that will skew how you
any society. I don't think it's just white. I think it's actually just society, because we actually see in every single country a right-wing movement right now.
Yeah, and I think I'm talking about like America specifically, but yeah.
Like last night when I came up with that idea, because that was literally last night. I couldn't sleep. It was just going through my head of the game show.
Right.
I talked to a friend of mine, and I'm like, tell me why this is wrong. Tell me what the problem is with this. His problem with it was stupid. His ex-wife's a piece of shit. And so it's like, well, my ex-wife loved to train. So it's like, no, I hated your ex-wife. This isn't a good thing. Like, it's like, no. Like, this is like, no.
A silly reason.
No.
Maybe not. Maybe they just weren't able to articulate it how they were meaning it.
No, he was just upset at, like, he was probably drunk.
Oh, so upset at something else.
Yeah, he was probably still like, I can't blame him for that, but it's, it's his ex-wife for a reason. But yeah, it's like, no, that was literally stupid. Come up with a better thing. Mm-hmm. Come on, man. Come on. I would really love to understand why this is wrong.
Right.
So I can fix it before it goes in. Because what I would like to do with that is maybe get somebody like Entrepreneur Podcast, Bill Strand, and actually go with him on like a pilot episode. And so we can actually use that to get funding.
Yeah. And
get that taxi guy to come on the first episode. Because Bill's ethical. So we can actually show more ethical types of thinking, and then possibly have more rescues and some more reputable people like Garrett Hart doing it for first, and do like a month episode. And then eventually then start letting other people who we don't know start doing it. Mm-hmm. And I think that would be the best way. So people kind of start getting that idea that maybe showing more ethics, because maybe showing more ethics doesn't work. But we would actually see that in that game show.
Yeah. Yeah.
But, what do you think about co-hosting sometimes?
It would depend on schedule. Right now, my schedule is a little wacky. But if we were able to like make something work and kind of plan out questions.
Yeah, and
that'd be awesome.
So what I would do is the same thing I do with Bill. Is I will actually come up with an idea, get guests, start to schedule it, and then try to get everybody scheduled together. And then I would just tell you, and so you could say, no, I don't want to do that episode, or I do want to, I have questions about that. And then you could get guests and stuff. You don't have to do any editing. I'll do all that. I'm just looking for another opinion on somebody that actually, this is why I didn't bring this up earlier, because I wanted to get to know you. I wanted to figure out who you were, wanted to see if we'd actually get along first. And everybody's like, she's amazing. She's great. Like that. It's like,
I have my faults too, but that's very sweet of everyone to say.
Who doesn't?
That's fair.
Yeah. No, one thing I was going to bring up earlier is how many of the YouTubers I have kind of come to understand aren't anywhere even half as good as you might think of a keeper necessarily.
Yeah,
they're doing good work.
Yeah, it's hard with social media, I think, in general, because you get snippets of stuff. You're never going to get the full picture. And I think that's one of those, like, is it the keeper actually letting you down, or is it your expectations of that keeper? And yes, I think standards for certain areas of the reptile community could definitely be higher, and I think they're working towards that. Yeah,
but not even that. Even people who do ethically, it's like, well, that doesn't, like, I don't, like, wow, okay, so I like what you said, but actually when we take it in this direction, we actually see a more truthful thing when it comes to their body language and stuff. Oh God, I can't. Ella's Reptiles.
Else, yeah,
great person. She's amazing. I wanted her on just because of her interview with the guy from Casa Stand. I actually want to talk to him, and I eventually, in college, I joined an Actis. We did a hydroponic system for an orphanage in Hades.
Oh, awesome.
I'm not a business major, so an Actis is an entrepreneur business group.
Right.
They do little projects to show how it works and stuff. And so I heard they were doing that. I'm like, I'm in. Let's do this. And so for them in Casa Stand, how helpful would that have been to have a non-electric hydroponic system that they could actually break down and stuff and actually have that stuff and have year supply.
Yeah.
And so let's see if we could actually do a fundraiser if they actually want it, and if we can actually ship to Kiev.
Yeah, that would be the other question. Yeah.
And
would you say, do they have are they a nonprofit?
I think so.
Okay, because if they're a nonprofit, then if you reach out to them specifically and ask them, like, hey, is this something that we could do for you? They can usually let you know, like, they'll take care of the logistics side of actually getting whatever is donated to them.
Okay, that would actually be interesting. And see, this is why you have knowledge that I don't. This is why I need a guest host. Plus, once again, like, I'm ugly and you're not, so people are more likely to tune in. And so the actual
humans are shallow.
They are very shallow, and I'm okay if we can use it.
Yeah, use it for good. Use your powers for good.
Yeah, that's kind of the thing. But then we need to make sure we keep it safe. We keep everything like that. And that's the thing, because I love that you're taking it that way, because sometimes when I say that, I think somebody might automatically go, well, Daniel's a piece of shit. He's like, he's sexist, or he's this. It's like, no, I'm just real. I'm just being real.
Yeah, that's hop onto Instagram. You will find that to be true very quickly.
Yeah. I tell guys all the time, like, you don't find girls in bars. You're not going to find them on the internet. You actually have to talk to them at work or in the store. You have to find them where they're at. And women don't go, hey, that guy's really cute. I want to date him. I want to be with him. They go, oh, that guy's really cute. I have to go get the next meal for the customer. That's it. Like, you have to end it there. When you're reading that body language, you have to go, stop. So you have to make people, you have to convince them they want the idea of that. Just like leading that little tick, that little. God. Now since I pulled out the gecko, I see that I have sand all over my computer.
Oh no!
Like I'm like, oh crap. Okay, that's all right. So
all right, well,
I was gonna let you go.
Yeah, perfect. It was wonderful talking to you, Daniel, and to meet you virtually and put a face to the name.
So next time when I do an episode, I may try to put that episode together with the 2 people that actually sell reptile stuff.
Yeah.
And Adam Wickens is a beardy mom. He put a hat on his beardy. So anybody saying that, people that put hats on beardies is shit, Adam Wickens is shit then.
I like Adam. Mom. Yeah, he and I have hung out a couple of times. He's great.
Yeah, I've tried to have him on, but he's like, nah, I can't do it. He's okay, though. I don't hate him in any way, shape, or form. I actually respect him for doing what he can to get here, because I know how hard that is to get to the United States legally. Yeah. So if he needs help with that, I'm all for it.
Oh, yeah. Him trying to move to Texas. Yeah.
Well.
Cool, man. Well, thank you so much.
I don't think there's as much editing in this as usual, so I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem.
Thank you.
All right. Well, enjoy your weekend, and I will talk to you soon.
Talk to you soon.
Okay. Bye Daniel.